right, my name is Zachary Reeves Blurton. I'm the president of the ASU LGBTQ Faculty Staff Association. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank you for being here with us this evening. I'm joined by Ann Kotleba, one of our faculty members here at ASU and an integral part of our Faculty Staff Association. And we're also joined by several members of our ASU community. But first, we really want to take just a moment to acknowledge the peoples that were on the land that ASU currently is before us. ASU's campuses are situated on the homelands of many indigenous peoples, including the Acamel Udham and Pipash. Arizona State University recognizes the original inhabitants of these lands and recognizes that they still reside throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. And we recognize the impact of their wisdom and generosity towards us. All right, the ASU Faculty Staff Association has three primary purposes. We're here to promote the exchange of ideas around policies as pertain to the LGBTQ community at Arizona State University, and to promote a better understanding and appreciation on the part of the university itself and our community as a whole on the issues that face our LGBTQ community. Another one of our roles is to help identify effective means and ways of expressing to the community's concerns to proper university officials and to suggest practical remedies as appropriate. And then finally, it's to serve by partnering with student organizations, with faculty associations, and with others who share our concerns and philosophy, and by communicating to university administration the issues and concerns of the LGBTQ community at Arizona State University. And that's really all of this is encompassed in what we're really trying to do here today. We're hoping for a very illuminating conversation with our three panelists on what we as members of our university community, regardless of our role, regardless of how long we've been with the university, what we can do to help make our university and its policies, its procedures, and its culture a more vibrant place for all of us. So with that, I'm going to turn over to my co-host, Ann Kotleba, if she would like to give a few words of introduction to our panelists.
Thanks, Zach. Also, I'm not sure if Kevin is on here. Kevin, if you're here, please raise your hand. I didn't see him listed, so maybe Zach, you can work on that and spotlight him when you find him.
Yeah, I'll get this on as we're going through this screen.
Great, thanks. So welcome everybody. This is one of our I guess, second community conversations that we've had in the last few months. We had one in the end of last year that I was fortunate to be a part of as well. And so we're grateful to our panelists today to be able to kind of go through some of these ideas. We have a variety of experiences, like Zach said, and excited to get things kicked off. So what I like to do is have everyone introduce themselves and what's important to you, how long you've been here perhaps, and kind of what your favorite Sun Devil moment is so far. In no particular order. We're still waiting for Kevin to hop on, I think. So Casey and Tiffany, if you would like to get us started.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, sure. My name is Casey Self. I am currently in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. I'm the Senior Director for Academic Advising. My favorite Sun Devil moment, doggone it. That's a hard one. I happen to be a big sports fan. So the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was the ASU Nebraska football game several years ago when Nebraska had been #1 for 2 or 3 years and ASU upset them 19-0. And I was with a colleague of mine who had never been to an ASU football game, and she was about 75 years old at the time. and we ended up down on the field tearing up the grass just like everybody else. So it was great. So
I'm Tiffany Lopez. I'm Vice Provost for Inclusion and Community Engagement, and I'm also a professor in the Sidney Poitier New American Film School. I'm a first-generation college student, and my favorite Sun Devil moment, I don't know why it never grows old, posing for pictures with Sparky, but I think I'm just really inspired by Sun Devil Giving and Sun Devil Cares, and how many in our community really rallied together to make sure that that there's avenues of support across such a wide spectrum. So that Sun Devil spirit always inspires me, and I don't know why, but Sparky lifts my heart.
All right, and I
That's
did
great.
just get a message from Kevin. He is finding his way back in. I think he needs to reboot his computer here.
You know, that happened to me in the classroom yesterday morning. I went to start teaching and the computer all shut down. So we all know how that goes. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. So so Sun Devil Giving is certainly a part of my life as well. I teach nonprofit leadership and management in the Watts College. And that's certainly a creating spaces for our new and future Sun Devils to be able to give back to our university as well as part of our tradition here. So Casey, I was wondering if you might be able to start us off in our discussion as you've been a longtime advocate for the ASU's LGBT faculty, staff, and student communities, including a member of the current Faculty and Staff Association, but also the predecessor Ubiquity. And I was wondering if you could kind of set the stage for us a little bit and kind of give us a little history from your perspective of what's happened here at ASU and how kind of the staff and faculty have been critical in the involvement of policy changes.
Great, sure, happy to. So I started July 1st, 1990 at ASU. So I actually just finished or celebrated my 30th year anniversary here at ASU. I was working in housing administration at the time. I worked in housing for 4 years, and then I became an academic advisor and then advising administration. It was, I'm gonna say about the early to mid 90s that there was a group of us, a small group of us at the time that decided that we wanted to form a group, probably more for reasons of getting to know each other, getting to know that we were not the only LGBT staff and faculty on campus. You know, ASU was a very different place back in the 90s in terms of size. I mean, it was still very large, but nothing like what we see right now. And so the group was formed. We had a mission and everything. Of course, back in the 90s, there were a lot of calling cards or issues related to LGBT faculty, staff, and just LGBTQ rights in general. I mean, this was before gay marriage, this was before everything, quite frankly. And a number of us were concerned about the fact that, you know, we had new faculty and staff coming in. Some at that point, domestic partner benefits were not even a thing. So through becoming a community, and at one point, I mean, we had, even by I'd say the late 90s, we had about 150 people on the listserv, the Ubiquity listserv. And I was scrolling through several of the people that are here, and I see some familiar faces, but I see a lot of new faces here. Definitely Stephen and Kenro have been here a while. So the big thing is building a community to help us identify individuals and help us identify what were some of the concerns that faculty and staff were going through at the time. It was, so it became a social group, but then we started meeting with leaders. Some of us met with Dr. Coor at the time, President Laddie Coor. Then when Michael Crow came, some of us had met with Michael Crow. And a lot of that was around domestic partner benefits at the time, because of course there were none. That was when other institutions, I'm going to say the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, is when other institutions started offering domestic partner benefit type resources for faculty and staff. And I think that's when we started to notice that, hey, we're going to lose some people. We're either going to not attract people here at ASU, or we're going to lose great people here at ASU to other institutions. Dr. Coor at the time, and of course, Dr. Crow, were both significant advocates in wanting to make sure that that wasn't happening. And so it was nice that they were willing to talk about that. We went through some other processes to look at other just ASU policies and procedures. And Kevin can talk more about this, but back in the 90s and 2000s, we were talking about ASU policies and procedures as opposed to state policies and procedures and national laws. I remember there was a gathering of students and faculty and staff, I'm going to say about 2001, 2002. It was a 2-day retreat, and we came up with a document that we affectionately called the Gay Agenda. And it was, and I have that document if anybody wants to see it, but it was very common things like LGBT students need a place to be able to be comfortable and protected on campus. ASU faculty staff, we would like domestic partner benefits, even policies, procedures like family leave. During that time, LGBT people were not given family leave at the same level. And just even, it's something as simple as, heterosexual individuals could bring their married spouse to the rec center, but LGBT couldn't. And, just simple things like that. And those were the types of conversations we were having over time in meeting with key individuals. I think the biggest thing for me is, becoming the small wins. At first we had some small wins, and starting with ASU, then starting to look at domestic partner benefits, then starting to look at state laws, those types of things. Another thing that we did as a community is we had something called the ASU Gold at the End of the Rainbow. It was kind of a community celebration, because there was nothing going on at ASU at that point about celebrating our presence and celebrating the research that's being done, celebrating our student achievements, our faculty staff achievements, who were doing things related to the LGBT community. And that event is what eventually became now the Lavender Convocation, which is where we celebrate each semester our graduates here from Arizona State University. There was an ASU Alumni Association that was formed. And that group did some specific significant things related to fundraising for scholarships. I don't know that that's continuing, but that is something we had. And then maybe another thing I'll talk about in the future is the LGBT certificate, a 15 credit hour certificate program that was created by a number of faculty and staff from across the university. But I'll talk about that maybe at another time, and I'll stop for now. Anne, was that what you were kind of looking for?
You're so inspiring. Yes, thank you.
Great.
And I heard that my mic was not working well. So is this any better? I took off my little.
No.
Okay, thank you. So let's see. So Kevin, you have joined us. Thank you. So sorry about the trip to the other Zoom room. We started off by introducing ourselves, and I asked our panelists to say their favorite Sun Devil moment. So I wonder if we can just catch everybody up real quickly. Who are you? What do you do here? And what is your favorite Sun Devil moment? And then I'd like maybe to ask you to kind of respond to some of Casey's initial points from your perspective. Oh,
you're still muted.
You'd think I would learn. So I wanted to thank you guys for inviting me to participate. I know several of you, but I know all of your names because in HR, I just kind of deal with names. So it's good to put faces with names. Kevin Salcido, I'm the VP Chief HR Officer. I've been here since 2007. I am an ASU grad. I'm a Phoenix native. I spent a lot of my career in the private sector, and I wound up working here, as I said, in my late 40s, and I love it. There's no place else I'd rather be. What inspires me about this place is just overall the scale, how large we are, how diverse we are, just how far flung we are. So there's never a dull day here, and I meet so many great people. I just consider myself blessed to be part of the leadership team here. My favorite Sun Devil moment, I would have to say the most impactful moment was back in 2008 or 2009 when we were having the big financial meltdown. We have this Nobel Prize winning economist on our faculty. I think he's still here, Ed Prescott. I think he worked in WP Carey. And he was having an issue with something, and Dr. Crow asked me to visit with him. So I went to visit with him to help him resolve his HR issue. And we started talking about the financial crisis. And by this, the stock market was swinging back and forth. And he sat down and he got out his pen and he had a whiteboard in his office. And he started to explain to me what was happening in the capital markets. And I'm thinking, here I am, scrawny Mexican kid from the desert, and this Nobel Prize winning economist explained to me what's happening in the financial markets. So it's such a huge impact on me. And, I meet people like that all the time. I've met people who, Kevin, can you get my team vaccinated because we're landing the rover next week and my team needs to be here. So, I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. I mean, there's so many interesting people, so many interesting things happening. So that would be my Sun Devil moment.
Great, thank you. And I was wondering if you might be able to kind of touch on a little bit of the history components to what, Casey was starting to tell us about a little bit about, kind of the history of ubiquity, kind of some advocacy and policy work that the staff and faculty have taken on here at ASU in, well, the most recent several decades, actually. And so where does that put us now? Is there anything that kind of stands out to you in terms of kind of what you've seen in your tenure? Change. I mean, you've seen a lot change, but what kind of, where do we stand now? And then we'll kind of work into what do we want to see in the future?
Sure. I think the biggest thing that people really underappreciate here, and I know we're being recorded, and I know Dr. Crow will probably not say this himself, and he may get mad at me for saying it, but he has such a huge bully pulpit in this state. He's been around, he's outlasted 3 governors, he's outlasted multiple presidents at the other universities, but he's been here since, 2002? So his voice carries so much weight in this region, not just in Tempe or Phoenix, in this whole region, in the whole state. So he's been very strategic as to how he uses his voice. I think he weighs in on things that he needs to weigh in on, but he doesn't get involved in all the issues of the day. So I think what really drives him, and it's in the charter, it's in the first sentence of the charter, is a focus on inclusion. And that goes to, the students that we recruit from 144 countries and 50 states, to the faculty that we recruit from around the world, to the staff that we recruit. So I think he wants us to be the most inclusive place possible. And I think he's succeeded in that goal. I always tell people the 3 most diverse places I've ever been in my life are the Vatican, New York, Times Square, and the fountain by the MU when those classes are changing. I mean, it's amazing the diversity that I see here. So he's very big on inclusion. I think he's a very courageous man on the stances that he does decide to take. He doesn't wait until he sees where the winds are blowing before he puts his stake in the ground. He's out there leading change. I think you saw that recently with the 25 initiatives that he launched, now renamed the LIFT initiatives. So he's always been an advocate for inclusion. And in a public setting, it can be kind of challenging because of all the political audience he has to satisfy, but I don't think I've ever seen him back down from that. Just briefly, from a policy standpoint, I think there's this misconception that somehow we're tied to the state and state sets our policy. It's not the case. Back in, I think, about 2012 or 2013, we actually inserted 3 words into a state statute that gave ASU the ability to create whatever personnel policy we want to create. So we have no ties to the state. The state has no influence on the policies that we create. They have no influence on how we administer those policies. So that just gives us so much latitude to make sure that we're always on the leading edge, whether it's our learning opportunities or family-friendly policies that we put in a couple years ago. So I think to me, that's the most exhilarating thing of working here is this, if we see a gap and he wants us to fill it, he'll tap me on the shoulder and say, go fill it.
All right, thank you, Kevin. I think we're going to mention really quickly, and just pointed out, we forgot to earlier, if you do have questions, folks in the audience, feel free to pop those into the chat. We'll make sure that we get to those. Our format today is to spend roughly the first half of our time together with some generalized questions that we want to flesh out with our panelists. And then we'll move to more of a roundtable towards the second end of this and bring in some of those questions that we see in the chat. I'd like to move to Tiffany Lopez briefly. I know that you've been at ASU for some time now, but are in a fairly new role. So we'd like to learn more about what your vision for inclusion and the Office of Inclusion and Community Engagement is at ASU, and specifically how within our newer context of Jedi work across the university and all these different spaces, how we can bring those together, how we can make some movement within all of our individual and collective spaces.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to join in this town hall and conversation today. I think it's incredibly important, and really very honored and happy to be here to be a part of it, especially stepping into my new role as Vice Provost for Inclusion and Community Engagement. I see that I wear a lot of hats, and one of them is to really message into the office so that I can I work as a collaborative partner from the provost office, so that when that I can have identify what we need to move forward and be able to partner with people like Kevin and hear thought partnership from all of you, and be able to reach out to people like Casey, as well as deans. And now today, just an hour ago, I launched the first meeting with all the dean designated representatives for all the colleges who are advancing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives. And so we just met today as an organized body of people, or about 40 of us, and we'll be meeting monthly to talk about how we're advancing those initiatives together across ASU, but also I'll be working in partnership with people one-on-one about what's happening internally in each colleges. So I think that's important to put on the radar, that that your college has a representative, and if there's things to message forward, not only for the college, but for the university, that's one way to message into the office. So in that way, I see that my role is to be a chief listener and a chief collaborator to help us advance these issues, advance issues at the university around JEDI and DEIB. My own background, I was previously, I came to ASU in 2016 as director of the School of Film, Dance, and Theater. And really throughout my career, I've led and produced work through the lens of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I'm a theater artist by training. I entered graduate school in the 1990s. And I left home, personally, I think it's important to share with you, I left home at the age of 15, fleeing a really violent and toxic household. And there's a lot of story to tell about that, but I came into higher education completely by accident. I was working full-time at a fast food restaurant. I got it in my head that I was working my way up. I had become a manager before I was 19, and got very excited about the prospect that maybe I would be a fast food franchisee. And the person I worked for said, you know, you should go to community college and get an AA degree. And I was at the right place, the right moment, with the right set of people. So I share that because when I went to graduate school in the 1990s, and as a theater artist, GLBTQ plus issues were just an organic part of my community and an organic part of my world and my family of my choosing. Having left home so early, that concept, the family of our choosing, that when I learned about that not only that it called to me personally to have me feel like I had a sense of belonging in a way I'd never felt before, it really called me politically and as an advocate into a community to really take seriously that when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it means everyone, right? And that as an advocate, you're thinking about holding multiple truths and complexities together. And so as a theater artist, that's my role is as a dramaturg. I'm a thought partner with the entire creative process, co-creating, but really thinking about how we achieve the mission of the work. And I really think about that I'm an institutional dramaturg in my role. I'm an active listener, I'm an advocate, and I'm someone to collaborate, almost like an agility player on the sports team, to understand how the entire university works and to figure out who I need to go to help us move forward issues, whether they're, policy matters or whether they're really that there's been some kind of miscommunication or a sense of grievance that someone's carrying, and how can I help come in and remedy that situation, not just in the moment, but really thinking about how do we build our climate and transform our climate so everybody feels included and welcome. So that's a little bit to share about my background. There's a lot more story there to share, of course, but to give you a sense that coming into my role when I joined ASU, that was the lens that I brought to helping to evolve the film program into its launch as the Sidney Poitier New American Film School, and really thinking about how do we have equity practices in our filmmaking and create inclusion and belonging in a film school so that we can transform the landscape of film culture, which has so much impact on all kinds of levels, about policy, about if you can't see it, how do you dream you can be it? So really thinking about representation on film has been important to me, as well as the work I do in the theater community. And then as an administrator and in the particular role that I'm stepping in, really thinking about how do we transform our institutions and the importance of a sense of belonging to all of that. So I'll stop there, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tiffany. Anne, did you have anything that you specifically wanted to follow up on there, or did we want to?
I did actually. There was a lot there. Tiffany, thank you for sharing your background. I think that's very inspiring, and I think there is a lot there that many people can relate to, even like you said, even if we don't specifically, even if it's not obvious, right? So, and kind of along that line of, I was wondering, kind of Casey talked to this a little bit at the start too, of like kind of this coming together of people at the university. It started in private. It started in kind of this kind of like closeted, sheltered space. And so and you talked a little bit about how we've kind of advanced from that. And so kind of where do we see this opportunity for, and I think a couple of us can touch on this, but this idea of creating safe spaces, creating safe community opportunities, both for our students and for each other and our peers. So in a case, maybe if you can talk to kind of some of your perspective on that, and then we can kind of bounce around.
Sure. One of the things that ASU had tried to do, and this was back in about 2007, 2008, at the time, the university had a multicultural student center, and one of the staff members that was hired into the multicultural student center was an LGBT coordinator. The thought process at that time was to have somebody that would do some programmatic functions for mostly for students, and that person would help student organizations. That position ultimately transitioned to the student clubs and organizations on the 3rd floor of the MU, which is now in the student pavilion. And I saw Leo on this in the call here. So, and he's got the current status of all that because he works with those students. But I think it was an effort to try to rein in the community and provide opportunities for people to gather together. It was about that time that ASU also started hosting, Welcome Week is a big deal here at ASU. And up until about, I don't remember the exact year, but I'm going to say roughly 2010, 2011, there was no events that were published in the regular new student orientation publications for LGBT students. And so we created a new student welcome that was right on the main schedule. There was a little anxiety around that, at the time, because we weren't quite sure how that would go. It was wonderful. We filled a couple of the Ventana ballrooms up in the MU the first time. We had significant turnout. And I think that was also, here at ASU, we have faculty staff going on and we have students going on. That was one of the times we realized, at least for our community, we need to make sure that we're supporting each other, that the faculty staff groups are working with student clubs and organizations, and likewise that the student clubs and organizations know who faculty staff are, can seek people out for role models, mentors, those types of things. I remember back, it was about 93 or 94, the first time, this is back when the state press was printed, on National Coming Out Day, about 45 of us put our names and pictures on the back page of the state press saying that we were part of Ubiquity and we're here to support students. Again, some anxiety at that time, but it was much more positive, and we had students reach out to us. Where I see it going is continuing the community. I think, and all of us have had our own experiences in our own community. We need to work together. We need to identify what are the needs for our community. Those needs are diversifying just like most other communities as well, especially when you start talking about generational issues. So that's where I'm hoping that this group or our organization can continue to keep the community connected, host things like what we're doing here today, also support our student groups. I know on our Facebook page, we're gearing up for the Lavender Convocation coming up. And I've always been a little disappointed that we don't have more faculty staff going to events like that. And I think it's really important that we do that, especially for those of us that never had that opportunity when we were students. So that's kind of where I see the group going. That's where I guess I hope it goes. There's not the domestic partner benefits or rallying cry anymore as much. There are still issues. I'm not sure. I was going to check this and I didn't. But I'm not sure if there's still a law in the state that for some state agencies that whether people can be fired for being LGBT. There used to be, I'm not sure if that was ever changed, but anyway, I know that wouldn't happen at ASU, but else places. Yeah, I'll stop.
A couple things in response to that, Casey. I think you're absolutely right. We've had a lot of interest from the student community and from what's now the Student and Cultural Engagement Office asking for, I think we're at a point where our faculty and staff are much more comfortable being a part of the larger university fabric as our authentic selves. I wanted to first point out that, in the early 90s, when Ubiquity was posting names, posting images saying we're here for you to our students, that was a remarkably courageous thing to do, because this was an era that it was very hard to find mentorship as a young LGBT individual at the college level or elsewhere, because it was a very real thing historically for folks to be dismissed from positions in higher ed at this time for disclosing that. So I think that that's remarkable that Ubiquity found that need and rose to that occasion so early on. One thing, I'm very sad that RG Esquer, who was lined up to be one of our facilitators this evening, wasn't able to join us because he really has been pushing for us to not have a one-way conversation, and for us as faculty and staff not to expect students to look to us for that insight or for that guidance, but that we need to invite them into our spaces. And that's what we're, specifically hoping to do through the engagement that we're doing, and that, they need to see us and feel comfortable with us before they're going to come to us with issues or ask for us to advocate to them. So I'm really, really excited that you brought up those specific points.
And I wanted to add to that too, because and kind of loop in Kevin here too, because what Casey started talking about, in this opportunity for policy changes versus in our right, we have country, state, and then here at the institution. And we've mentioned that President Crow has kind of led the way on this in several instances, and we could we saw that before. Same-sex marriage was legal throughout the United States. I was not here yet. I was still living over on the east side, so I'm not sure if this is correct, but my notes say that ASU kind of led that, or had that opportunity here before the state even did. We can also see that in the Deferred Action of Childhood Arrival, so the DACA program, and most recently, I think we could look to that and say, President Crow has issued public statements about that and ASU's commitment, right? So, in situations, and so I just read in the news, Mesa is currently has a city ordinance that they're trying to pass that would be equal to the ones that we have for, I believe there's 5 cities still, Phoenix being one of them, and that have essentially what they're trying to pass at this U.S. level called the Equality Act. And so that would be, so you wouldn't be able to be allowed to be fired if you were LGBTQIA. And so I was wondering, and so, so this kind of affects us, and it does, because we if we're protected here at ASU, but then our partners or our loved ones or our kids aren't protected in the state. How do some of these situations at ASU where policy and the legal protections kind of go beyond those offered by cities that we live in, states that we live in, but how can we balance what that looks like here at ASU? And are there opportunities for us to kind of get involved and help support that?
Well, I would
from an HR perspective.
Sure. That's a great question. I want to go back to what I said earlier about Dr. Crow using his bully pulpit. And, ASU has so many more resources for influencing besides Dr. Crow. We have a very robust and very well staffed government relations people. I don't know if you've all met Matt Salmon. He was a former influential congressman. He runs our federal lobbying programs now. Incredibly nice man, very, very effective, still has a lot of influence on Capitol Hill. We have great government relations people that are working at the legislature every day. Whenever there's something that has a potential to impact ASU, they flag it for us. We have wonderful community relations and government affairs people at the municipal level too. I think we have people assigned to all the major cities in town. So we have a lot of influence besides Dr. Crow. So, Dr. Crow, again, is not shy, and he's worked behind the scenes with people like this to impact public policy at the state and the local level. So part of it is just making sure he's aware of what the issues are. And I don't ever think he's ever had to be convinced to do the right thing, not in the 15 years that I've been here. So again, look at ASU. We have a huge footprint in this region, huge footprint. We're a major employer. This is not a city that has a lot of corporate headquarters or foundations. ASU is, we carry a big stick around here. So people pay attention to what ASU says and to what ASU does. So I would say we need to leverage that to our advantage whenever the opportunity presents itself. So again, it's in our charter. Again, we serve the communities. We're not we're not a university that's walled off from our environment. I've been to some of the big Ivies back east. You actually have to walk into a gate to get onto their campus. Well, in whether it's downtown or in Tempe or Skysong, there's no way of telling where ASU ends and where the community begins. So we're deeply tied to the community and we're deeply influential in the community. So even though something is happening in Glendale that may not have a direct impact on ASU, we still have the ability to influence it.
And I can talk a little bit about, so yes, before the Supreme Court passed law, Dr. Crow did instigate domestic partner benefits at ASU. And the way it worked was basically individuals could obtain kind of like supplemental pay to pay for the additional health care benefits that for their partner, their spouse, that were covered under normal marriage law. And that was in place, I'm going to say around 2-3 years prior to, the one challenge with that was it was considered taxable income. But it was still something, it was an option for people to pursue that. And I know we had many individuals that pursued that. I actually pursued that when I learned that ASU began accepting marriage licenses from any state prior to the Supreme Court ruling. And that's when my husband and I were in Palm Springs 4 weeks later getting married. And, because we could do that. So, yeah.
Zach, you may be muted.
Of course, I was unmuted when I thought I was muted. Tiffany, our next question is for you. I think we've kind of been heading in this direction with a few of these answers here, and that we're really talking about intersectional communities here, right? And that was, that's one of the reasons that ASU did move away from that idea of a multicultural center back at the time that it did was we wanted to move away from these centers that were siloed in the way they serve discrete portions of our underrepresented community. But at the same time, we've seen that students are still calling for continuation of dedicated safe spaces for them. Of course, at an administrative level, we know, well, all of ASU should be that safe space for any student. But in your mind, is there kind of a mutual way forward here? So creating these community specific spaces that provide that sense of safety and resources and or honoring the heritages and cultures of our various communities, but at the same time fostering this sense of cross-cultural exchange and decreasing this insularity.
Yeah, I think that's such a critical part of the conversation. I mean, the Multicultural Center is something that in the President's 25 commitments and the LIFT initiative, as well as through student government, giving ongoing feedback and advocacy for, that is something we're working to realize. And we're also, evolving to be able to look at the two things and how do you have something that's very inclusive and at the same time talks about the specific needs of different community members. We need to be able to talk about both things at the same time. So, in the classroom, for example, talking about creating a sense of belonging, we want to, we have different professional development and teaching development programming that we're working to advance for all faculty. And I know from, having been a director of a school, a really important thing to evolve is, use of pronouns and seeing students and making sure that you have agreements with students about how they want to be seen and called on and understood and positioned. That the complexities of doing all that, that is why I think it's always so exciting and generative to make sure that faculty, students, and staff are talking about these things at all times together. I mean, I love higher education because I'm always growing and thinking about these things. How can I be in better service to them? So, you know, Latinx, that was not a term that I used, but now I use that term because I understand how important it is for a certain generation of students. You know, I think in the 90s, you know, the nomenclature evolved, but now here we are with LGBTQIA plus being able to, you know, embrace the intersectionality. So I think it's a matter of, you know, education, advocacy, but being able to have the specifics of history and the specifics of our personal stories, as well as data, you know, showing that I loved, you know, I love how Casey and Kevin are sharing with us their work, but also they're witnessing the evolution of our policies and our community on campus. You have to have that data in order to talk about where are we in the here and now, and where do we need to lead forward. And I think that that's something, you know, ASU nationally is seen as a leader because we are embracing these things and figuring out how do we do two things at the same time? How do we have a spirit of welcome, but without that watering down the need to talk about specific things? So when we talk about safe space, welcoming space, that's something that's very specific for different communities, and we have to be able to talk about that, as well as having, you know, with the Multicultural Center, you know, understanding that the call for that is so that students, especially those who are in crisis, don't have to spend an hour hunting around online or going to 5 different offices to figure out how to get their needs met or to find the support resources, that they have a designated space that's really thinking through all these possible issues and how to get students immediately connected campus, but most importantly with one another. So that's I don't know if that's a very direct answer, but certainly it's to say that's something that I'm constantly thinking about in the charge of my office. And, you know, the Vice Provost's Office for Inclusion and Community Engagement, it too is constantly evolving, right? And which is why hearing from everybody, you know, please don't be shy, you know, please reach out and share with me things that you feel we need to have on our radar and be taking on, because the office is wanting to evolve to make sure that we're serving our community in the present tense. So thank you for that question.
Can I pick up on that on the employment side? We have about 13,000 full-time employees here, 8,000 staff, balance faculty and other administrators. And to the degree that we have turnover here, on the staff, and it's probably a little bit higher than I'd like to see it. It's not as high as you see in higher education, but it's higher than you see in the private sector. About 50% of the people that we lose in any given year have been here for less than 2 years. Okay, so about 75% of the people that we lose in any given year have been here for less than 5 years. So why is that important? Because once you've been here for 5 years, the likelihood that you're going to stay just starts going like that. Before you all started, I was asking a few of my colleagues how long they've been here and why they stayed. So the reason I bring this up is when you talk about engagement and inclusivity and having a sense of belonging, people make up their minds pretty quickly when they join an organization as to whether they're going to stay there or not. I know I've walked into jobs where like, oh, bad mistake. How can I fix this? So what we need to do is we need to make sure that as we're welcoming new staff and faculty, that we're, number one, that we're removing barriers for their success, that we're pointing them in directions of mentorship programs, affinity groups like this, so they feel connected, and that we genuinely make them feel valued and welcome, because people are making up their minds in those first few months as to what their career at ASU is going to look like. So it all goes back to this whole concept of, do I feel like I belong? Are my differences respected here? Is my opinion heard? Do I have upward mobility potential here? Do I see people who look like me above me in the food chain? So all that kind of works in together. So it's not only on the student side that we have to be very sensitive to how people feel about how they're connected to the institution, it's also on the faculty and staff side.
Thank you, Kevin. That's actually a really perfect segue to our next question that we had for you. Speaking specifically as we're looking at changing demographics among faculty and staff, we did have a number of questions that came in advance of this session, specifically looking at ASU policy around trans healthcare or around specific healthcare access issues, benefits. I know that our graduate students are looking at making changes to not to policy, but to how it is made accessible and immediately apparent to incoming students. But on the faculty and staff side, as our faculty and staff needs evolve, what are the procedures in place? How do things go from requests by incoming faculty and staff or points of discomfort to university policy? How can our trans faculty and staff or their allies, for instance, begin doing more targeted advocacy to see that change that they need in policy?
Well, I can hit the benefits issue head on because I think I saw a question in the chat box, in the chat feature earlier, and that is all that stuff I said about being disconnected from the state, that's still true, except our benefits. We're part of the state benefit plan, and we're part of the state retirement plan. And it's been a long sought goal of the president and my boss and me to create some space between where we are with this plan. Now, for a variety of reasons I won't go into now, it's a very big political lift to do that. Not the least of which is we comprise about a third of the state's plan. Okay, when you combine all the universities, we're about a third of the state plan, which is a monster number for them. Now, we've also done studies that have shown twice that we are paying more for our insurance than we're using. Does that make sense? In other words, ASU employees tend to have higher incomes, higher educational attainment levels. They tend to be clustered in metropolitan areas, and they tend to be healthier. So all four of those, of course, are indicators of people that are using insurance less. So the reason I say this is because we've had pushes over the years to separate from the state benefits plan. But if we walk away, there's like $40 million of savings that walk with us. Okay, so now you're going away from the policy to the political. All right. So what governor is going to sign off on letting $40 million worth of healthcare savings walk out? How's he going to replace that? Okay. So the reason I'm giving you this big run up is we are still bound to state benefits by virtue of our size, our scope, and politics. So I will continue to advocate here until the day I retire that we have our own plan so that we can have more input over plan design, plan communication, and what things cover. Now, to hit the point head on some of the medical procedures that are not currently covered, I'm aware that the University of Arizona has a lawsuit against the state, the ADOA. It's wending its way through the courts. I believe they're in the discovery phase right now. Okay, so we're monitoring the lawsuit. We're advocating for the same things that the U of A is advocating for, and that is to cover some of these uncovered procedures. So as we see this thing unfold, I've opened a conversation with the provost and the provost, plural, and my boss about potential looking at additional alternatives should this coverage never come into play. And I look at things like the fertility subsidy that we did a couple years ago, and the adoption subsidy we did a few years as potential models, not making any promises, but these are things we can do to help folks offset some of those costs that are not going to be covered by insurance. So I hope that's answer made sense. We are still tied to state benefits, and there is a political element at the state level. There is an active lawsuit between the state and the U of A over this very contentious issue over what's going to be covered and what's not going to be covered. So we continue to advocate on the right side of this issue, And we're prepared to produce alternative arrangements if we're not successful.
I thank you for the remarkably transparent answer to this. I think that's one thing that in this time of COVID, our university from the top has become very adept at that transparency piece as far as discussing what we're going to do around, around COVID, around the various issues that are impacting all levels of the university community. So I think that, this is a very positive direction, and I think that it's reassuring to our faculty, to our staff, to our students to know that, there is advocacy going on behind closed doors, that, it might not be politic for ASU administration to share with the broader community, but that work is ongoing. So thank you for that peek through that doorway for us.
Yeah, it might be a bit too wonky for you, but really that's really the case. There's these cost elements that are putting us at a disadvantage, and there's these political elements that are putting us at a disadvantage, but that's kind of where we are. We continue to press.
Well, thank you for that. And did we have any more specific questions that you want to get to from your end, or should we start? I'm seeing a lot of questions starting to come into the chat. Should we move towards the round table and give some space for all of that discussion to breathe? Yes?
Sure, yes, I think that would be great. I just wanted to ask real quickly on that, just a follow-up of what's the best medium to be able to collect that information if somebody is experiencing, because like Zach said, we got several questions, and we even have some in the chat regarding kind of these more nuanced health insurance, health disparity kind of questions. How can we message that up the chain? Can we email you directly or is there other? I'm
telling you, you are more than welcome to send me an email or to send Dr. Crow an email and CC me. He gets these emails all the time, and he's very responsive. He's not the kind of guy that hides behind 14 layers of gatekeepers. He's right there. If you send him an email, he'll be responsive to it. That's been my experience with him. He's never tried to hide from it.
And thank you, Tiffany, for sharing your email address in the chat as well.
I just saw a couple quick questions that I think I'd be able to address in the chat. So my understanding, if in terms of preferred name, my understanding is that in the My ASU system, now this is for students. I do not know about faculty, staff, in that the students have the ability in their My ASU to go to their profile, and there is a way for you to adjust your preferred name that should affect most kind of course rosters and those types of things. But obviously something's not working, or maybe it doesn't work for faculty, staff. I'm happy to provide a contact. I know the registrar office wants students to be able to change their name and give faculty and everybody their preferred name. So if it's not working, send me a direct email, casey.self@asu.edu. I'll get you in touch with, and it looks like somebody else might have just touched on that as well.
Yeah, Cheryl's the right person.
Yeah. Okay.
Ask the community and you shall receive.
And Casey, your email address is now in the chat, and if you'll
Thank you.
send me your cell number, I'll put that there too for them.
Okay.
I'm totally kidding.
That's fine.
I learned that very early in my career. We don't give out those numbers.
And I did want to make a plug too. I believe this is still the case in anyone that's doing Zoom classrooms. There's a setting that you have to change in order to allow students to change their Zoom name. So anybody that's hosting Zoom meetings, ensure that I can't tell you for the life of me where it is right now, because Zoom, but I do believe there's a button somewhere in the settings that opens it up, but it has to be unclicked in order to allow everybody in the Zoom room. So any faculty, anyone that's hosting meetings, because I know that your Zoom name is sometimes attached to your dead name, and so, or whichever that system is, because I understand that that has been an ongoing conversation for the past few months or years at least, since I've been at ASU. So just want to put that plug in there. If I can find a screenshot, I'll have Zach email it to everybody.
Oh, don't ask me to do that. I already messed up Casey's email address.
All right, let's see. I think we've touched on most questions. I did want to circle back to a few things that have been brought up, specifically regarding the college level JEDI programs. Tiffany, if we don't know who that person is, how can we find out who our representative is?
Well, if you reach out to me, I can share that with you. Of course, like a lot of things that may evolve, but I'll have, I should have up to moment information. So you could reach out, or you can reach out to the dean, I believe, of your college directly, just asking who it is. And I'll be working with the JEDI leads to figure out how to make that completely clear on each college's webpage, so that students don't have to hunt for that. But as we revamp the Provost office web pages, we'll definitely have that as a space where you could see who those representatives are.
Great, thank you. And
actually, I have a follow-up on that too, for you, Tiffany. How do you see, so, I mean, we're working at so many levels right now. We've got your office, we've got various colleges that offer everything in infrastructure, from an informal committee to designated positions tasked with JEDI initiatives. And then we've got the various university and provost level committees as well, such as Committee for Campus Inclusion under your office, and then our numerous faculty staff associations. How can we all get on the same page? Where does that conversation need to drive through?
And what do you mean by getting all on the same page? I mean, I'm working to do that. I would love to hear people's thoughts on the need for that, and where you're seeing like the loose threads and how to cohere them, because our biggest challenge is our scale and our scope. But to advance this work, I mean, some of this work is connected with policy. A lot of it's interconnected, like hearing Kevin talk about healthcare and policy, and following some of the comments and the concerns that are in the chat. There's also the climate issue. Like, as a former director, I was working very hard to set a climate and educate faculty about the importance of using gender pronouns, but also colleagues with one another at the meeting table, because we've had faculty really come into consciousness about how they want to have agency over who they are, and the processes and procedures and the way they want to publicly face their identity. And all of those things are interrelated. So I think our working together is crucial. And that's the work I'm trying to do, is to identify how do we build coherency so we don't have so many people feeling like they're reinventing a communications wheel, or discovering that there's two different people who should actually be in conversation with one another, or that you can't move something together unless these 5 people know about each other and are moving together. So I'm thinking about that, but I would really, please reach out to me and let me know where you see things needing to be cohered, because it's important to me that we do that as a community, that there's a point person, around JEDI issues, but a real, understanding. I want to come into understanding about where the coherencies need to be made.
And I think Tiffany's learning what I've learned, and that is, this university is a collection of large organizations. It's not one large organization, it's a collection of large organizations. How many colleges do we have, Tiffany? 17? 17 colleges, 17 different deans who kind of operate as their own CEOs of their own units. And then, add a police department, add a performing arts venues, add a multi-million-dollar athletic program, add a technology office, yada, 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 all the way down the line. You're not going to find a place more diverse, not only the diversity we already talked about, but just in diverse in function and scale and scope. So it's very easy in this place for the left hand not to know what the right hand is doing. In fact, that's probably more common than not. So that's the role that Tiffany can play, or that's the role that I can play. If you're doing something in your college or your unit that think can be, transmitted to another college or unit, please let us know.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned in the chat EOS, and I'm working closely with Dean Cassandra Aska with EOS and Kenja Hassan and other folks in EOS. I see that as really important.
I think I see that as an opportunity for our faculty, staff associations, and our various professional associations as well. I know, speaking of, we hit on this earlier with the evolution and based on the need of the faculty and staff of what was then Ubiquity and now is the LGBTQ Faculty Staff Association. But I think, advocacy is, I think, still an important space for organizations like ours to live in, but in a different way. I think that it's not so much maybe an advocacy of, well, these are the needs of our community, but because we more readily understand those now, but maybe a matter of directory assistance of, okay, we know that these are the needs we're hearing. Here's how we can connect those from the units through the Provost's office on the behalf of, certain parts of our community.
I'm just posting a policy in the chat room that we just revised. It's our professional development release time policy. And basically what we did is we increased the amount of hours that a staff person can get paid for professional development activities from 16 to 24 hours a year. And then we also made it very clear in the policy that you can use this time not only for your traditional professional development learning opportunities, but for participation in affinity groups or like this, or participation in mentorship programs. So take a look at that new policy. I think Dr. Crow referenced this in his note to everybody last week. So that policy is live and it's up to date. So 24 hours paid. And we encourage, this is a learning place, and learning is not only what happens in the classroom or online, it's what happens when you're interacting with very smart, capable, talented people. So I always encourage people to mix it up when they get here.
I think Ann and I are playing the, I think you look like you're about to say something. I'll wait a second and I'll jump in. Did you have a follow-up, Ann? Or did you want me to plow ahead?
No, I was going to say thank you for that. And then I was starting to type out a response to Lulu in our chat. I just wanted to make sure that this goes addressed to the name issue is something that is on many people's radar, as far as I understand. And so we do hope to get this resolved. I know that there have been several people working on it. And some of whom I think are in the audience today. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that is being addressed. So with it, throw in some more questions if you all have them. Otherwise, I think with our last remaining time, if anybody, I think we could probably go around and say some final thoughts on kind of this. We've hit a lot of topics overall. We've hit a lot of channels. We've hit a lot of kind of what is happening and touched on what we hope to see happening too. And so that's, always encouraging. And I think that, kind of with our final thoughts, maybe we can think about So what are these ways that we can continue to advocate for ourselves and for our community members to be strong allies and to be and to kind of pass messages to whomever we find needs to hear them? What does that look like, and how can we continue on with this legacy that Ubiquity built for us many years ago, and continue to move that forward?
Let me answer that question on the climate survey. There is an effort underway to do a university-wide climate survey. Tiffany and I have been working on a proposal with Nancy Gonzalez, and we're in the development stage. This is something that we'll probably build internally. And so Tiffany, you want to chime in on that as well?
Yeah, and there are different colleges. Some already have a climate survey of their own that they've put underway, but the provost has asked us to, hold off on any more of those so that we can really develop and administer a campus-wide climate survey so that we can hear from the entire community and work together to address the issues. So, and know that that's a lot of stakeholders. I mean, Kevin has been working really hard to bring together many stakeholders and to think about not just having a scattershot climate survey, but a climate survey where the results are really going to help us address the critical concerns and the type of nature that we're seeing so many of you express in the chat. So, thank you. Thank you for that, and know that that's underway.
Yeah, we want one climate survey that's replicable, and where we could create benchmarks and dashboards where we can see where the numbers are in any different department, unit, and how they compare to a baseline. So that's our ultimate outcome. And I think the timing is heavy lift, but depends on how much more time this pandemic takes out of all of our schedules. But I'd like to have something done by beginning of the new academic year.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned in the chat, one of the things that we're thinking about in relation to a comment in the chat is we don't want the climate survey to be a kind of one and done thing. We're really working to innovate. How do we have a consistent delivery of climate surveys? And so this one is to help us figure out how do we have a follow-up, an annual, semi-annual, whatever measurement of time, so that we can look at our benchmarks. Like Kevin was saying, there's data there where people are really tracking, all right, what is happening before year 5 and what do we need to do after year 5? So I've been part of a conversation with staff about, there's a conversation in play about having stay interviews rather than exit interviews, interviewing to really understand what made people come here, what were they enthusiastic about, what continues to keep with enthusiasm, but what's threatening a sense of belonging or enthusiasm, what is surfacing that are making people feel at year 2 or year 3 they might not sense that they belong or feel connected in the way that they first felt when they were initially hired. So those things are being thought about so that we can remedy and be better. We should be better.
I see a question in there from Jay. What are the efforts being made to make these conversations, considerations, and work visible to the student body at large? What are the ways students are brought in the fold? I think that's been a challenge at ASU for many, many years. There are many issues related to our LGBTQ community that are community-wide, regardless of faculty, staff, students status. When we start talking about policies and procedures related to working here at ASU, that's when I think it gets a little challenging, because it's not that students don't care about that, because they do, but in terms of bringing that information out front, it usually stays within the faculty staff kind of communication channels. Personally, in the olden days when we had a printed state press, it seemed to me that more people knew what was going on because the paper was at every single little corner of campus and people picked it up and read it. Now that everything is online, I think everybody's kind of dispersed into their own little worlds and following their own little, preferred channel. So I don't know. I don't know how to, but I do think as in a community, both faculty and staff, we do need to talk about how do we keep each other updated, included, and how do we help each other? Because I think that is a challenge. And it's,
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I would agree with that statement. I think that's a fair statement.
All right, well, I was going to say we've got about 5 minutes or so here. Do we have a few more final statements to kind of wrap up here?
Yes, somebody asked, brought up in the chat about DEI efforts being counted in future annual evaluations. That is definitely something that's a topic of conversation to ensure that not only is that leadership and those efforts being acknowledged, but that it's also helping for accountability loops, that's something everyone should be held accountable. It should not be an icing on a cake, but a main ingredient in the evaluation cake. So no, that is something that was brought up today with the JEDI representatives meeting. And that's something that's on the radar in my conversations with others in the Provost's office.
Excellent. And we're seeing more conversations around including diversity statements in faculty hires as well, aren't we? Across not only pockets of ASU, but broadly within more and more institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people, the other thing is thinking about the charter. I mean, the charter is about all of us. So that charter focus on access and inclusion, living our charter values means advancing these things, talking about these things, acknowledging it, but also looking at, is everyone playing their part to advance our charter values, right? Faculty, staff, and administrators as well, because we together comprehensively move the charter forward for our students. So having it in evaluations, I think, makes sense, but also, putting it in as a part of our job ads and our recruitment strategies, because we're seeing that with a lot of people who are joining us because of the charter and what they're reading into the charter. But we have to talk about really what that means and have accountability for it, so that we don't all assume we're on the same page and then find out at the end of the day we're not all on the same page, and we need to be.
I have a quick final comment. Personally, I think we dodged a bullet in this last election cycle in terms of, people feeling like they are a part of the community and recognition of our community. It could have easily gone the other way. And I think, not only the LGBTQ community, but, in terms of immigrant status, who knows what the future holds. And, if things change and people start talking about changing laws and policies and recognition, there may be rallying cries in the future. And I guess I just hope we don't ever lose sense of that, because you never know. Anyway.
All right, well, we do have just another minute or so here. We wanted to thank you all for your time and your insights here with us, and to thank you, our audience, for bearing with us as we navigated the wilderness of multiple Zoom issues. And did we have any other comments from the chat that you wanted to bring before we go ahead and wrap up and kind of look at some future programming?
So there was something that I'm not sure if anyone can speak to, but there was a couple of conversation questions about the application process and only having male or female as an option for, you know, when we, before a student even starts ASU, they're, you know, asked to kind of choose that. I'm not sure if anyone knows if there's, if that is something that's being addressed, or if that's a, you know, I'm sure it's on the radar of somebody. Casey, do you have? Okay.
The only thing I was going to say is the same issue has come up about the application to ASU for students. I know that the admissions office has looked at some different models. I don't believe there's been any changes, but it came up from that standpoint too, as well as applying to work here probably.
Mm-hmm. So again, I think this was a really great, you know, kind of as we wrap up this conversation. Again, I do want to thank everybody for participating in this, you know, and this is a perfect example that, you know, Keith just mentioned too, is that the work's not done. There is still things that, you know, are working on, and Tiffany's and everyone's spoken to it, you know, so it's still affecting our members of our community in different ways. And so, you know, I think that there's, Zach's going to give in just a minute kind of different ways to continue to be involved with this organization. But I wanted to give the plug to something we started talking about within the history here at ASU, and the Rainbow Convocation, once known as Lavender Convocation, and this idea of the goal. I wrote it down, the goal at the end of the rainbow. And I just want to end on that note, because, you know, this has been the hardest year, I think, you know, for many people. I'm actually really emotional about it, just thinking about it, because it's been so difficult for our obviously for our students, but for our staff, our faculty, everybody. And so, you know, we're really seeing this convocation at the end of this semester as an opportunity to really highlight those bright moments. And Zach's going to talk about another event that we have coming up, but we're taking charge for the Rainbow Convocation too at the end of the semester, and all of our special interest and convocations in general, and graduation to, you know, we need to have those times to celebrate. So I think that's
Exactly.
I'm gonna pass it back over to you.
Exactly. And, you know, and that's really why, you know, our association has really made a push to get reinvested and re-involved with the community this year, because this is the year that none of us have the bandwidth for it, but we all have the need for these things the very most. So just before we close here, I did just want to briefly share some upcoming events that we are getting ready to hold. And one is just coming up later this month on the 18th of March. We're calling it 525,600 Moments, a year in the LGBTQ life amidst pandemic. And again, this is an event that came out of need from our community, of folks saying that, you know, this has been a really traumatic year, but we need an opportunity to connect and to recognize that, you know, that we have prevailed, that we have been resilient, have learned ways to be more resilient. And part of that is through our advocacy work, right? That's fulfilling for us. That's a way that we feel that we're making a difference at the individual level. But we also want to, within the Faculty Staff Association, give space for recognizing the individual challenges and opportunities that we've had this year. So we really do encourage you to join us on March 18th from 5 to 6 p.m. For this event. It's held in partnership with the Center for Mindfulness, Compassion, and Resilience and ASU Thais Spontaneous Theater. We think that it's going to be really exciting, but also a really healing opportunity for all community members. So we encourage you to follow our Facebook link, or follow us on Facebook. The link is here on the screen, as we'll be releasing details of this very shortly. One other piece that we do have coming up is in association with Barrett the Honors College. We are working again to get more deeply embedded with our student communities. This is getting back to that idea that in order to be allies and advocates for our students, we need to allow them a chance to get to know us as the adults in the room. This is, again, going back to RGS Scare's favorite term for the Faculty Staff Association. So again, please watch our Facebook if you are interested in participating in or simply attending either one of these events. We'll have more details of these coming up very shortly. I think that's about it for me on my end. Did we have any final thoughts from anyone else before we shut down?
You know, I just want to make one brief comment, and that is, you know, it's such a pleasure to work here, as I said at the beginning. All these different flavors and people, it all comes together, makes a great gumbo of a place. It's a community, it's very special. I think we do a lot of things right. We do some things wrong. So never be afraid to point out, hey, you guys could be doing better on this. I mean, nobody here is defensive. I don't have all the answers. Tiffany doesn't have all the answers. Casey doesn't have all the answers. I mean, we're just trying to figure out along the lines with everybody else. So never be shy. Never say, well, somebody else will address that. Just let us know. And as big as we are, we're still very small. So never be shy about pointing out things that we can be doing better. And, you know, obviously, because we want this place to be even more special than what it is right now. So that's Zach and Ann, thanks again for the invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you, all three of you, for being here, for the work that you've done and are continuing to do to advocate for folks.
See you guys.